Welcome back to Getting Past the Premium, everybody. This is going to be a fun episode today. I'm joined here with David Sliman, and David and I met through some LinkedIn connections, which has been fun to get to know each other on LinkedIn. And then we hopped on a call and bantered back and forth about sales for a while. And so
Man.
I'm excited to bring you on, man, because I think you've got a lot of experience in sales in a wide variety of industries, and excited to kind of talk through how that can apply to the insurance and risk management industry. But before that, I want to, let you help everybody understand who you are, what you do, little background, and then we'll go from there. So,
Yeah, absolutely. I've been in the sales game for about 25 years, believe it or not. I'm aging
yeah,
myself here, but ultimately,
you
here's what it
don't
comes
look it,
down to.
David. You
Yeah.
don't.
Well, thanks, man. I appreciate that. A little gray in the beard.
Mm,
But realistically, what it comes down to, where I'm at the point in my career is I've trained and developed organizations. I'm a sales professional at heart, but I was lucky enough to be mentored and coached by some great people on how to understand and build organizations. But in all the organizations that I've built, I was really focused on the sales arm, the sales division, the sales growth of the organization.
yep.
And I've developed sales training programs, I've developed sales coaching, I've done business coaching, I've done anything in the sales world that revolves around coaching. So through the years of going through that grind and developing strategies and execution plans and figuring out what to do as well as how to do it. About 3 years ago, I started doing my own consulting work.
Yeah.
So now I specifically go into organizations. I look at their sales execution plan, their framework, everything top to bottom in the sales division, management, do management coaching, comp plans. I mean, everything and anything that revolves around the sales. But more importantly, I put a lot of focus into coaching, training, speaking. I do workshop events and really have morphed my career in helping professionals become stronger. Well, not only professionally, but also, as we all know, our professional lives bleed over into our personal
Oh
lives.
yeah.
So I do a lot of personal development as well.
Yeah. That's awesome. Well, that's why I thought it'd be fun to have this conversation. I think it hits on, or could hit on so many different areas that we talk about on the show, because sales is wide ranging. And so,
Yeah.
um, before we started, we were kind of talking about, I think you have an interesting view on kind of your four main principles of selling,
Yeah.
right? And
Yeah.
I'd love to start there because I think it's a good foundation of how you view the world of sales. And so let's walk through those, and then I think that'll lead us down some other rabbit holes. But
Yeah.
what are the four main principles, and kind of how did you get to that point where you got boiled it down to those four things?
Yeah, I think through the years, again, the experience and working with so many professionals or being mentored by professionals, it was fun when I first started doing consulting work. I had all these pieces and parts kind of put together. I had this presentation, that presentation, I had this. And what I did is I just took everything and I started formulating it and looking back at the things that I've trained on through the years and coached on through the years. And it was kind of easy. I wouldn't say it was easy because it always keeps evolving, but the pieces were all there. So it really comes down to this, Elliot. It's one, you got to have a great mindset. I mean, you've got to have clarity, and be open to receive new information and
Mhm.
also take some risk and try some different things, right? And have a different approach.
Yeah.
Yeah, the second thing is being able to prospect and set appointments and get in front of prospects. And we're going to talk about this a little bit more. But rather than just saying what you do and how great you are and how big your company is, more importantly, start speaking the language of your prospects
Yeah.
with challenges and getting them interested in the idea. And I say this a lot, earning the right for their time.
Mm,
Okay. Earning the
yeah, I
right
love
for
that.
that appointment,
Yeah.
earning the right for their time. That's a big point of it. And then obviously, and not obviously, but the third pillar is really a great presentation framework to be able to go through a cadence where you're identifying a little bit more about your prospect, what their challenges are, setting it up so the fact that you can fill some of those challenges, what your product is, what makes you different, okay,
Hmm.
versus the next person.
Yep.
And ultimately, some validation, I think, is really key too. And there's great ways to do that, which we can talk about. And then the last step in this is a creative. I don't even like using this word follow up, but creative follow up and closing. Okay. Rather than just saying, "Hey, I was checking in," or "Hey, I was just following up on that quote I sent you and see if you wanted to move on it." There's better ways to really get back in front of your prospects and identify that. Sometimes it's timing, sometimes it's interest level, other times it's just not being top of mind. So those are really the four pillars of what I like to train on and really help build off. Because once you've had that foundation, you can really start building off that foundation and maximizing your skills.
Yeah. Oh, I love that. And it helps to have a framework to work off of.
Yeah,
Um, I mean, I really want to dive into mindset because sometimes I think
yeah,
I agree with you. That's where the foundation of it all is, which maybe you can give a little bit of your thought process around mindset. But then I think uh, where a lot of our industry is kind of going or getting caught up is what you said around speaking the language of your prospect.
hmm,
And so much of our industry is going heavily to niche based marketing and niche based focus, which, is kind of dependent upon how you want to approach the market. But I think that big time leans into being able, when you're niche focused, you can better speak the language of the prospect because that's who you work with regularly.
yeah,
You
yeah.
learn a
You're
lot more. And
specializing
so,
it. Yeah,
yeah, that kind of hit me as one too. But start with mindset because I mean, a lot of people don't focus there, especially in our industry. And just to give you a little background of some of the things that I think people run into is in our industry, everybody has to buy insurance, right? So you
yeah,
have a product that everybody's already buying, and so it can be easy to fall into some poor sales habits,
yeah,
because you think like, again, if I can find it cheaper or quicker or whatever, then I can win some deals. And it's a volume game and it's a numbers game. And if I get enough quotes out there, I'm going to sell enough business and so on and
yeah.
so forth. And so talk about that from a mindset perspective of how can somebody kind of shift that perspective so they've got the right mindset as they're looking at and building their sales.
Yeah. Yeah. I think the first thing you have to do is just be open to receive information. There's a lot of great stuff out there, whether it's books, whether it's podcasts like this,
Yeah.
whether it's audiobooks if you don't like to read. Like I'm an
Yeah.
audiobook guy too. I mean, I do both, but sometimes I'll do both audio and read the book at the same time, depending on what it is. But ultimately, I think it's good inputs, good outputs. One, you got to be open to receive and identify that you want to improve. You have to commit to that. Once you commit to that fact that you want to improve, you want to be the best in your class, that's really the first step.
Yeah.
And then this is going to sound a little bit odd, but the next step is picturing how your life is going to be, how your business is going to be, how you're going to operate when that business is going the way you want it to go. Okay. So
Yeah.
you're almost doing like an A to Z thing, right? From
Yeah.
a
Like
from a visual
visualization.
standpoint.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then everything in the middle, this is the hard work. Okay. Those
Yeah.
first two things, are really almost the obvious, but the first one, the commitment is once you've bought into the commitment, then it's like there's no stopping you at this point. Once you have this conviction and you're intentional each day about what you want to have at the end here, okay, that's where it all starts. So I always contributed to this, and I'm going to try to keep it brief. But from a mindset standpoint, you have industry knowledge, right?
Hmm.
And then you have skills, sales skills.
Yeah.
Okay. And what you're trying to do is this, if you're thinking of it as a graph that way, you're trying to push it up,
Yep.
right? Trying to get both industry knowledge,
Upper
learn
right.
learn
Yep.
more things. Yep. And you're trying to understand the skill, then get better at your skills. But there's only one thing. There's only one thing that's going to elevate both of those, and it's work ethic.
Mm.
Okay. It's work ethic. And you'll hear this, we all hear this, work smarter, not harder. And I reframe it. You have to work harder in order to earn the right to work smarter. I'm going to
Yeah.
say that one more time. You have to work harder in order to earn the right to work smarter. Because if you put my 25-year self in this position right now, I'd be a bumbling fool sitting on here. Okay. Because I
Yeah.
haven't gone through the process. And what happens is professionals get so tied up in the results that they really don't identify or even enjoy, for that matter, or recognize the journey. And doing this for 25 years, I promise you, it's about the journey. It's not about the end result. If you set your mindset, one, that you're ready to go, two, that you're going to put into work to improve your skill set and also your knowledge of the industry, and then you put in that work and you're intentional every day, the world will just, it'll work with you
Mm-hmm.
in order to help you
Totally.
achieve your goals if you're doing the right thing. And that's so hard because I think the biggest thing and why people just don't take this step is because they're nervous about failure or
Mm-hmm.
being maybe even judged, for that
Yeah.
matter.
Yeah.
And I say, forget that. I'd rather give somebody who put an effort in and fell short or failed, because it's not even a failure. If you learn from it, it's not a failure. But if you don't learn anything from it, then that's a true failure in my mind. So in going to that and looking at that, it's not that people are lazy. Okay. And, well, some are. Okay. There's
Yeah.
some people who are just lazy out there. Right? All right. What happens is this: their skill set or their knowledge are not improving, and they start going through this motion of prospecting. They start going through this motion of presentations, and they're not focused on elevating their skills. And what happens is they start getting crappy results, right?
Yep.
So it's not that they don't want to work, it's the fact that when they're putting in an effort, that the results just aren't there, right? It's like Pavlov's dog, right? It
Mm-hmm.
rings the bell, boom, he knows when the
Yeah.
bell rings that there's going to be something good on the
Free
end of
food
it.
or whatever.
So if
Yeah.
I'm walking into a sales presentation, or if I'm running a quote and I'm like, oh, I got to run this quote again, I know I'm going to get, the 50% chance. My actions aren't changing any of the results that I'm receiving. So as a professional, you got to be real with yourself and identify, okay, write down 5 skills that you're really good at, if you have them. Write down 5 skills you need to improve. Write down 5 knowledge points of your industry that you are strong at, and write 5 knowledge skills that you need to improve. And that's almost the start of this. And when you start putting in that work, man, you're going to go up that chart and you're going to start breaking through some thresholds. But yeah, I think that's kind of the nutshell. And the last thing I will say is that, Elliot, it takes thousands and thousands of repetitions in order to be
Mm-hmm.
great. Okay. So to master something, I'm sure you see it. There's very talented professionals in your industry that you've worked with.
Yeah.
Okay. And I will tell you this: they didn't wake up or come out of the womb with a pen and a piece of paper writing insurance deals,
Kept picking
right?
up a phone. A phone.
Right?
Yeah.
Right? They
100%.
didn't do that. You show me anybody who's successful in that industry, I probably will show you a lot of failures, and I will show you a lot of roadblocks, and I will show you a lot of successes that they've had. And I truly believe that you have to go through 3 phases in order to become a pro. You hear that thing, man, they're a pro, or she's a pro at this. It's been a lot of work. There's 3 stages. The first stage is the beginner stage, right? It's very awkward,
Yep.
kind of going
Yep.
through the
You're learning. Yeah.
process.
You don't know what
You're
you know.
learning the language a little bit. You're stumbling. You're not getting the desired results, but you've got to start measuring this progress. Okay, got to start compounding this progress. You got to start identifying wins, but your actions really aren't adhering to the goals. But it's very quick. It actually, you can move out of this stage very quickly if you're getting enough reps.
Mm-hmm.
And then the second stage, which is the experience stage, this is the most important stage. This is where you're getting a lot of reps. You're getting some wins. You're getting some failures. You got to monitor. You got to evaluate. You look at the negative results. You look at the positive results. You got to celebrate the wins.
Yep.
Okay. You've got to really be disciplined in this stage, but this is the stage where you've got to get 4 or 5,000 repetitions. I mean, you're in the stage a long time. And then there's this last threshold, this pro stage, right? Becoming a pro. And there'll be this time where your level of consistency just, starts elevating. You know what to say. You're comfortable. You're confident, right? Going
Yeah.
into, there are times where you might not get it. You might get
Second
it.
nature. And yeah.
Nothing's going to stop you, but you still have to keep growing at that point as a pro. You still have to keep evolving. But you get to this point where this motivation that you started with now turns into a discipline.
Mm,
And when you progress over this beginner, intermediate, and then elevate into a pro stage, now you've had a true discipline to understand what it takes to really elevate numbers. Because once you know your numbers, it's like, man, I just start manipulating. I make more touches. I know I'm going to get more
yeah.
appointments. I'm going to get more sales. But
It's
you
more
got to know those
science.
numbers, and that's kind of, if I could wrap it up into a conversation with you right there, that's my idea of mindset, is really knowing where you are, where you were, where you are, and where you want to go.
Yeah. I There's so much in there I think we could dive down on. But I mean, I love the concept of the getting to professional, and I've used the term like turning pro, but
Yeah.
I think it's more of the mindset of making the decision that you're going to turn pro. And that
Yeah.
means that you're going to commit to this path of knowing you may not be good today, but you're going to get the reps, you're going to get the knowledge, you're in that beginner stage, but you're going to do what you have to do to get to the intermediate stage. Then you're going to put the reps in there. But it's not allowing it to happen to you. It's making the decision that you're going to turn pro in your daily actions and disciplines to get there. And that's
Love that.
seems simple, because everybody's like, yeah, I mean, I want to be successful in this career. And well, the question is like, are you committing to actually doing the work you need to, which doesn't mean just the calls and the drop-ins. That's a part of it. It's, are you doing the personal development? Are you getting the knowledge you need to? Do you have a plan as to how you're going to do that? Like, have you put the
Yeah.
work into that piece? Like all of those things that truly think about, like you think about it, the top level NBA players, they have a consistent rhythm as to probably how they got from junior high to the pros, of like getting better every single day and getting
Yes.
all the stuff. And at some point you have to make that shift in your mind of saying, I'm going to go from just, doing this thing to turning pro at this thing. And that's a whole
Yeah.
different mindset shift once you really realize what that means.
Yeah.
So I love that
It's
even that
really,
word.
yeah.
But
Yeah, it's really interesting. No, you hit it right on the head. And there's so many things that, just from what you were talking about, that really trigger me, and in the fact that there are times in my career where things were not going, like it wasn't going well. Like
yeah,
I'd have weeks where I wasn't selling, or my business wasn't going the way that I thought it was should be going. But I was very intentional about my process. And that's one thing I want to talk about, is two words, the I word and the C word: intentional and consistency.
yeah.
If things were going bad, I was consistent. I was still following the process. If things were going good, I was consistent. I wasn't getting
Hmm.
happy and sitting back. I was definitely consistent. So if there's one word that I can use that is very important when it comes to running an agency, being a successful agent in the business, you just have to be consistent. And those days that are hard, that you keep plowing through, are the days where you make actually the most progress.
Yeah, I totally agree. And then even the flip side of when things are going good, because this is
Yeah.
what will happen in our business. Things run on expiration dates, and you're on the clock of the prospect. But we'll have a lot of prospecting activity. We're very consistent. We get a bunch of opportunities. Things are going well. We start to either close or not close some opportunities, but we don't prospect. Now we don't have any opportunities. So
Uh,
it's the roller coaster of sales, right?
it sure is, man.
And everybody gets into that at some point in your career. And I think that's where that whole turning pro, a pro will be consistent every single day. When
Yeah,
Michael Jordan's winning championships, he's still in the gym the next day at 6 a.m. shooting free throws. It's because
that's it.
he's a professional. That's his process.
Yeah,
And I think that's so key. And that mindset, that's why I love, how you start with that, is having that mindset to, this is where you're going to get and this is who you're going to be, is such a key component of
yeah,
being able to get there and being able to get from beginner to that pro level stage.
yeah. And I tell you, I'll wake up every day and go, I'm gonna be a pro today. I'm gonna
Yeah.
be a pro. Just start speaking
That-
that. That's a
It's a
simple
different
thing.
frame. Yeah. It
Yeah,
really
you just
is.
start framing it, right? I'm huge on manifestation. I'm huge about putting stuff out there. It's real, everybody. Manifestation is
I
real,
agree.
and putting it out there and saying it is really powerful.
Yeah,
So yeah, I want to be a
100%
pro.
agree. Okay,
Love
so
it.
I think that's step number one.
Yeah,
you have to be able to have that mindset and know kind of where you're at, where you're going, what it's going to take to get there and be committed to it. Um, but then I love the prospecting stage in there too. And I think this would be a
sure.
great conversation for everybody. It's essentially, how do I get that first meeting? And I think that's what a
Yeah,
lot of people struggle with.
yeah,
Um, and I'll frame this up a little bit to get your perspective, because you
sure.
hit on, speaking the language of your prospect, which I think is a big key. But the problem is, I think a lot of people are in our industry are picking up the phone and dialing. They're willing to put the work in, but they're sounding exactly like everybody else. It's, hey,
Mhm.
David, I'd love to talk to you about your construction company and when your insurance renews. I'd love to get you a quote. We've got some
Yeah,
markets that, nobody else has, or we've been really having a lot of success on businesses like you're saving you money. Would you take a meeting? Kind of
saving
thing.
your
All
money.
that
Yeah,
stuff, right? Well, it
yeah,
just sounds like everybody else. And so I'd be curious how you're training people to think about that conversation differently. How
great,
can you stand out? What are you
great
saying that's
question.
different that might give that prospect a reason to take that meeting,
Yes,
et cetera?
yeah, yeah. I think it comes back to what I started earlier. Okay, the first thing you need to do is what you said. Stop being ordinary.
Yeah.
Okay, just stop sounding like everybody else and everybody else out there. Be unique, and I'm going to give you some strategies to do that if you're listening. Okay. Um, you have to earn, like I told you earlier, start. They don't owe you anything. It's called cold calling for a reason. It's not warm.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
It's not warm calling. This is
You are
cold calling. So
interrupting their
it's
day. Let's
yeah,
be
you're
clear.
interrupting their day. So I use the technique called the permission-based opener, which I'll talk about here in a second. But realistically, it's earning the right for their time. Okay. And then recognizing the fact that you are interrupting them. We'll get more into the technique. But speaking the language of your prospect, the first thing I'll say is this, okay? Don't sell the product.
Oh,
I'm going
yeah.
to say that one more time. Don't sell the product. Sell them on the idea of why they should meet with you. Okay.
Which is a big frame for everybody. Everybody listen to that.
Yeah. I'm
Very
going to
good.
frame that one more time. Don't sell them on your product. Sell them on the idea of why they should meet with you. Change that mindset and
Hmm.
work on that dialogue. Okay. What makes you different from any other agent out there? Okay. And if you're not different, you need to find something that makes you different. And
Exactly.
I mean, we're all individuals, so I mean, we have the ability to make ourselves different. So the first thing I always say is just don't sell them on the product, sell them on the idea of why they should meet with you. And then I work on this technique with organizations across the board, and I love doing it. It's one of my favorite exercises. But it's called the power statement. And the power statement really is wrapped up into this. One, um, what challenges do you conquer for your prospect? Two, how do you do it? And three, what the heck makes you different? And it's a little bit more than that, but that's really the essential framework of
Yeah.
this. And, I've been in rooms with 20 sales professionals and putting together a power statement, and it's amazing the stuff that comes out. I even try to get depending on the organization, I really like to get the owners in if it can happen, or at least the upper level management too. And then sometimes it'll be a room of 5 people with the CEO, I
Yeah.
mean, but I was just working on actually this week with 3 people who had a company on their power statement. And it's amazing what comes out of this because what you might think is a challenge for somebody might be a different challenge for another person and vice versa. But the long and the short of it is you have to really identify the challenges of your prospect, how you do it, and what makes you different. But I want to come back to what you said earlier. I don't mean to keep bouncing around here,
Oh,
but
yeah. This is great.
phone call, okay? Or walking in the door on somebody. Like we talked about, it is cold calling. So I use this technique called the permission-based opener. And
Yeah.
the permission-based opener will separate, it's the most underutilized technique in all of sales and organization. Everybody just, hey, Elliot, how you doing today? Oh boy,
Yeah.
credibility dropped.
Yeah.
Hey, I wanted to talk to you
I
about
was doing well.
yeah, it was what how can I help you? Right now, because what we're ultimately trying to do when we prospect is bring down barriers
Yeah.
versus bring up barriers, right? So if you want to bring up barriers, just ask them how their day is, how are you doing, and how your business is, and how I can quote you a number. Like just go right into that and you'll bring up barriers. But to bring down barriers, the first thing you need to do is show respect of time. Okay. Hey, Elliot, I know you weren't expecting my call. Do you have a minute? I promise to be brief. And you'll be amazed when you use something like that. Or, hey, I was just headed to an appointment. I thought I'd stop in. I want to introduce myself. Can I steal a quick minute? So, asking for time in whatever way you feel that is comfortable will show respect. And you'll be amazed. And that's why it just rolls off my tongue. Ellie, hey, I know you weren't expecting my call. Do you have a minute? I promise to be brief. Rolls off my tongue because I've said that 1,000 times, but you'll be amazed how many times people go, uh, yeah, like they don't know if you're a prospect. They don't know if you're, they have no idea at this point.
Yeah, they're at least probably
So
gonna say, what are you calling about? You
yeah,
know?
yeah. How can I help
Yeah.
you? Or what's going on? You know, so I think just asking that respect of time is a really important technique. And then
Can
going
I
into, yeah, go ahead,
can I
please.
jump in there? I
Yeah.
mean, also, I think, and I love your perspective on how you do this, like respecting that too. Which if you're gonna say you're gonna be brief, or you're actually just like mean it, and if they
Yeah.
say
Yeah.
like, hey, I really am tied up, don't try to overcome that. Like say, hey,
Yeah.
well, okay, great, I totally understand that. Like, what would be a better time I could call back? Does Tuesday at 3
Amen.
work?
Yeah.
Because I think oftentimes, or I've been on the receiving end of that, where we might get a question like that, and it's like, I am really in the middle of something. Well, okay, I'll be brief. Let me just tell you about my product. It's like barrier went up.
Come
Like
on, dude. Right,
you
right.
just
And
get
you're not
hung up.
even listening, right?
Yeah.
You're not even listening.
So,
Yeah.
anyways, you keep
Nah,
going
yeah,
with
I
the
think you make it. No, I think you make an exceptional point. If they're like, yeah, I'm busy right now, find out when you can call them back and make sure you call them back. Be punctual on that time
yeah,
where they said you can call back, and it will show again credibility versus bringing up barriers. So
yeah,
there's a lot of opportunity here for that. Uh, so now leading in with the challenges, I always like to say I specialize in working with, consumers. I'm an expert in, think just a nice validator
yeah.
is always a good way to show credibility again to your prospect. But I think about your industry, and I could be off on this stuff. Again, I haven't worked directly in the insurance space, but there's a heck of a lot that translates over
Oh yeah.
into this. But yeah, I mean, as an agent, my guess from a consumer standpoint, that some of the challenges that they would be up against is one, just understanding their policy.
Mm-hmm.
I'm gonna tell you a story. This is a real story from a consumer. I have an agent who still does some of my stuff. But I had an opportunity because my son's in the military to go to Liberty Mutual,
Oh yeah.
and matched everything up because he's in the military. We got this military discount where he just couldn't compete. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So I had the real conversation with him. I mean, it wasn't even close, man. Okay. It was like it just wasn't close.
Yeah.
So we kept a certain part of our stuff, our home and everything with him, but we had to take advantage of the auto side. Well, when him and I started breaking this stuff down, like he's like, you got to make sure it's this. You got to make sure it's this. And no pun intended, he's been an agent of mine for years. But I learned so much just going through this process by understanding my policy. I really just said, okay, here it is. You do it. I trust you, kind of thing, right? You get that. But I think there's an opportunity to grab some attention by prospects. And one, just understanding the options, understanding the policies, determining the right coverage, right? These are some challenges people consumers probably run up against. Balancing cost with coverage. Sometimes there's things you can live with, sometimes there's things you
Yep.
can't, right? That could save dollars. This is what
Mm-hmm.
I learned in this thing. Um, Obviously evaluating credibility is a big one. Referrals are big, but also navigating the sales process, bringing somebody through the process, making them understand that this isn't a high pressure deal. This is just me trying to educate you, right?
Yep.
Versus take the point of how can I save you money, right? Because saving money is the biggest one. But more importantly, if I can educate you a little bit, maybe it'll offer an opportunity for you to identify things that I'm not working on commission, so to
Yeah.
speak, but more the tactics, not even sales. But I
Yeah.
think the big one here is understanding the policies, and there's so much fine print in these things that I've learned in going through this process that there's opportunities to get more of a grasp on the policy
Yeah.
and having that personalized service. Listen, is Liberty Mutual great? But yeah, I don't get I'm not going to get the personalized service I got with that's the big thing I notice right now.
Yeah.
And then fortunately, I haven't had any claims yet or anything, so I don't know the difference, but just the responsiveness. So when I look at the challenges, I ask you, and I ask the listeners out there, what are the things that are most challenging for your consumer prospects? Like, what are some of the things you can alleviate from them?
Yeah.
And you just lead with that. Listen, I specialize in working with consumers when they're in need of better credibility with their agent, balancing their coverages versus cost, navigating through the policy exclusions or fine print. I do all that. And all I'm looking to do is grab a few minutes of your time, learn a little bit more about your approach and see if there's a fit. Like it can be that simple.
Yep.
So, and again, I'm not
Well,
versed in it, but you got
yeah,
the
yeah.
wheels, we got the wheels turning here.
How do you so in that, I mean, you just listed off 3 or 4 things that again, even not being well versed, like you could help a prospect with that they may or may not care about.
Yeah.
And you said something in there like price is the big one, obviously, which is for many people, not always for other people, but oftentimes like we just make assumptions in what's going to be important to this prospect. So, at this stage, like, how do you approach that? Right. Because, like, I might be calling you up and you might ultimately not care if you spend 10% more on your
Yeah.
coverage because you're like, I just want my business. I want to make sure it's covered. I'll spend a little more, whatever. I'll self insure more of the risk. Like, you might look at it slightly different than business over here
Yeah.
does. And if
Yeah.
all I do is say, David, I can save you 10% on your, premium because of this and whatever, you're going to be like, yeah, that's not really that important to me. Like I'm comfortable where I'm
Yeah.
at. And like,
Yeah.
so how do you approach that in that conversation? Cause I think you did hit on it a little
That's
bit where
such
you're
a great
offering,
question.
yeah, one, two, three, four things, but walk through that
Such
just
a
a
great
little bit.
question. Comes back to what we talked about earlier. You got to get the reps. Okay. Because once you get the reps and you start identifying the objections that you're getting, okay. So if I made 100 calls and 70% of my calls were objection A,
Mhm.
60% of my calls were objection B, 50% of my calls were objection C, and then there was a bunch in the middle. Man, I'm just going to cater my dialogue around the most common objections I hear because I'm going to douse them now. Not only am I going to douse them, I'm going to build credibility for myself
Yep.
because they're going to go, oh yeah, you know what? Actually, I do have that challenge because listen, 70% of the time or 60% or 50% of the time I get on the phone with a prospect, I know that they're going to be up against that challenge. And if they're not, it's still going to sound credible in what you're doing.
Yeah.
But yeah, you have to, that's where the metrics come in, right? And the measurement of success. Identifying knowing your numbers, how many touches it takes for you to get a decision maker, how many decision makers it takes to get an appointment, how many appointments it takes you to get a sale, and what your average sale is. But more importantly, identifying your metrics when you're prospecting is the objections.
Yeah. That's
What
so spot
objections am I hearing? Yeah.
front run them, so that and what you said there. So I'm a big believer in front running objections. Because again, you get the same stuff over and over that you're going to hear. It's one of
Yeah.
5 things, probably.
Yeah.
Um, so front run those, but I loved how you said it builds credibility. And that's something I think gets lost on, especially a front end call, because you can do those 2 things very quickly where you're front running the most, impactful or most frequent objections.
Yes.
2, though, if you do it in the right way and you use, to your point, the language, like put in some industry jargon that they might use or like things that
Yeah.
all of a sudden to them go, oh, wow, yeah, he does probably know my industry. Like maybe he knows something I don't know about other people in my
Yeah.
industry that are how they work with their insurance agent. Um, you can, yeah, that's so spot on building the credibility there. I mean, that makes sense to me. I haven't really put it in those terms that is something that front running those objections allows you to do.
Yeah. Yeah, and then just going into what you do and how you do it is, hey, listen, I gather some information, I sit down with you for a few minutes, I compare some numbers, and then what's great about our program is, and I'm just spitballing here,
Yeah.
90% of the time when I meet with a potential business owner or a consumer and looking at their insurance, I can save them money. I don't know if that would be the number, but that's the differentiator. You know, it could be a differentiator in how many times you meet with people, save them money. Maybe it's the access to different packages you have,
Yeah.
but you want to throw in a differentiator, something that makes you different with your resources that the other agents out there don't really have access to. And it could be internal. It could just be you could be the differentiator yourself, you know.
Yeah.
You may be specialized, like you said earlier, in an industry. One of the differentiators, I specialize in working with XYZ companies, and I am very confident that with a little bit of time, I could add some benefit and some savings to your business as well. So again, just come like you said, coming up with some industry not jargon, but industry specific type value terms.
Yeah, well, I think that's huge. Shows you understand, and then test these things out too. Like that's where the reps come in. You can test out a
Uh,
couple things. Is it that you're able to save money at your differentiator at the end, or is it for this type of client? Maybe it's I don't know, lowering their auto claims because they're in trucking, or they're in high over the road type of exposures. Like there's just differences in who you're targeting, and that you have enough conversations and you do it if you're going to start to figure out what those differentiators are. But if you don't know and you're young in the business, or you want to target a new niche, like there's two things I would recommend, and I'm curious your
yeah,
perspective here. Number one, take a wild ass guess. Like just come up with a hypothesis. Don't make anything up, but say like start with something that you think would resonate with your prospect and test it out, see what happens. And then secondly, you can use a lot of AI tools to help you brainstorm that. And they're very good at that. So if you went into
yeah,
Chat GPT and you start to say, I want to target, this type of a client, what are the top objections I might get on an initial call? Like it'll do a pretty good job of at least exploring that with you. And you can start to build some of those things, take the techniques that David's talking about and ask it these same questions, and it'll help you work through them. But
yeah,
those are a couple little things that if you're newer, you can probably, take your first 1,000 reps out and replace it with some work on
yeah.
the front end. But
It's a good point. It's a good point. And listen, it's not these power statements sometimes are never perfect, right? I mean, you'll cultivate a really good one, but sometimes they'll evolve based
yeah,
on industry changes, based on certain things that are going on with the economy, or and they can be tweaked up as time goes on. But once you've laid down the foundation of the power statement, you can really kind of plug and place different things in there. And I think it's a great approach to just start working on it. And especially in the beginning, it's like, man, it's like a recipe of a cake. Like you have all these pieces and parts, and all of a sudden you put it in together
yeah,
and you work it and you get the reps like you just said, and eventually you've got this great cake that you've just baked for yourself, and it's
yeah,
powerful. And it will and here's the other thing, Elliot. It will bleed into everything. It'll bleed into your email messaging, it'll bleed into your marketing,
that's so
it'll
true.
bleed into all types of things when you develop this sound power statement.
Yeah, and I think using the baking the cake example, it's so true too. Because it's like if anybody's tried to bake a cake, the first time it's gonna be really bad. Nobody's gonna want to eat it.
Right.
Like, so
Yeah, yeah,
remember that.
someone.
Your first times you're
Yeah,
you're trying these things out and you're making your calls. Like you may not be very good
yeah,
at it, but you do it. You continue and you turn pro and you realize that this is who you're gonna be. You'll get better, and it'll
yeah,
come
it
with time.
will.
You just keep tweaking your process.
Yeah, yeah. It's not
Well,
about perfection; it's about progress, brother.
there you go. I love that.
Yeah.
100%. So I know you're busy and I know you've got a lot on your plate, but we've got two more
Uh-huh.
principles we haven't even hit on yet, and we're
Oh
coming up
yeah,
on time. I'm wondering
we're
if
rolling.
we don't grab another time here and do a part two if you're up for it, because I think that'd
I'd
be
love to.
really fun to
I'd love
continue
to.
this, and maybe
Yeah,
everybody out there can be watching in a month or two. We'll kick
yeah,
out part two. I think that'd be great because I think we've covered a lot
yeah.
of ground here that folks can take
Yeah,
away and implement.
we'll pick up part two, and we'll talk about a great presentation framework more than just sending over a proposal, like
Yeah.
what you should be doing here and how you should be dressing this thing up. And then we'll talk about creative follow-up and creative closing and how to convert deals and get people kind of who are on the fence there drawing more credibility what you're doing and converting more sales. So yeah, I'd love to do a part two. I think this has been
That's
a fantastic conversation, and you've been spot on with your questions and just very good on really picking up. Well, you do this, right? So we've been able to translate both worlds.
yeah.
And I think I'm going to start working in the insurance industry because
I
this is a
think you
great
should.
topic.
Yeah. 100%. Well, on that note, I mean, in the interim, how can folks get a hold of you? Where can they find you?
Yeah,
Socials and everything.
absolutely. Yeah, just check me out. I'm on LinkedIn. It's David Sliman, Sliman. My company's on LinkedIn. It's Sales Proformance, Proformance. And then we got our website, salesproformance.com. If you want to email me, it's D Sliman's my last name, Sliman at salesproformance.com. Hit me up. I'm happy to help in any way I can, and just love doing it. I really appreciate the time too. It's been a great
Yeah.
interview.
No, it's been awesome. And we'll plan to do it again. We'll get it on the calendar and hope everybody out there took something away from it. So
All
appreciate
right.
you, David. I know again you're busy, so I appreciate the time. And
No, this is fantastic. Yeah.
that was
Go
fun.
get a win, man. Go get a win out
There
there.
we
Anybody
go.
listening, just go get a win and stack it. Big on
Heck
that.
yeah.
So,
I
all
love
right.
that. All right, man. Appreciate it.
Thanks a lot. You bet.